Hello YouTube, Dave here again. This is a follow-up video to my first impressions that I did a little while ago on the Prince of the Apocalypse. The video was basically a very quick flip through and just what I thought at a quick glance. I've had a little bit more time to sit down and read it. I haven't read it like completely through cover to cover, but I know enough about it now that I'm comfortable doing a more detailed review. And what I'm going to do is kind of break it down chapter by chapter before I give my closing thoughts. So starting with chapter 1, which is basically all background. It goes into the history of the Temple of Elemental Evil itself, as well as the backgrounds on things like the individual cults. So there's sections for each of the 4 elemental cults, as well as 20 or 21 different plot hooks that you can use for your players. Something that will help them with their investigations, give them a little bit of information to go with, at the very beginning to kind of move things along. So there's a lot of great information there. It also details the different factions, like the Harpers, the Lord's Alliance, Emerald Enclave, Order of the Gauntlet, and the Zentarum. As well as like where their strongholds are in the region that the campaign takes place. It doesn't really go into much more than that, so it's not like, this is their motivation, so to speak, in the region. It just kind of gives a description of who they are and where they are, basically. There's even a little section, which I like, of giving you an extra plot hook if you have run the Lost Mines of Phandelver adventure from the starter set. So it actually, will incorporate something if you've done that. Now, it gives you the basic plot hook. It doesn't really give you anything to go on, considering that the campaign here is meant for 3rd level players to start off with. And if you did the Lost Mines of Phandelver, they're likely 5th level by the end. So it would have been nice to have had a little more information on how to beef up the encounters for the 5th level characters, but I think it's something as simple as just adding a few hit points, maybe an extra +1 to hit for some of the tougher enemies, and an extra +1 average damage. But it's still nice to see that they actually included that. So like chapter 1 is basically all the background information that you need, as well as the hooks to get the players involved. Chapter 2 is a detailed explanation of the Discern Valley, and I hope I'm saying that right. Where the campaign takes place in. It actually has a really nice detailed description of the town of Red Larch, which is where the campaign kind of starts. It also has some descriptions on the various NPCs that you would interact with, including which ones are informants for the various factions, for example, and things of that nature. There's also a nice section on, when we get to it, there's a nice section on the travel times and distances, things like that, as well as some encounter charts and just some descriptions of other areas of interest in the Discern Valley itself. So it's definitely a nice chapter and provides a lot of great information for the DM to digest before actually starting to run the campaign. It's great because it kind of fleshes things out and makes it feel more, like it has more character to it before you start. And the first 2 chapters do a really great job of that. So the first 40 pages of this book are basically the background and the setting before it actually gets into the campaign itself, which starts on chapter 3. The beginning of chapter 3 focuses a lot at the beginning on this investigation for a missing dwarven delegation that I believe came out of the dwarven citadel of Mirbar. During their investigation, trying to uncover the location of this missing delegation, the party kind of starts getting introduced to the elemental cults. Now, learning about the elemental cults in the valley is actually kind of interesting because it provides a great opportunity for role-playing. Not all of the elemental cults are openly hostile at the beginning. There's chances for the players to interact with them. For example, and if they kind of, find the players to be useful, they may turn them against other the competing cults. Even though they all work for the Elder Elemental Eye, the individual cults still kind of compete with one another. One of the basic examples is if you have relatively decent dealings at the beginning with the Air Cult, which are known as the Feathergale Knights in this chapter. They may actually decide to send the players against the Earth Cult, which is like the Sacred Stone Monastery, I believe, is their outpost, and the Sacred Stone Monks, so they kind of, set you against them. And usually, I think all 4 of the cults are more or less receptive to the player characters trying to infiltrate them, maybe as members or with the with the air cult, the Feathergale Knights, they just, basically invite them in and kind of get a gauge of what their motivations are. And, if they are useful enough, they'll actually try to incorporate them into their cult, basically, citing that they are trying to master the element of air in order to, defeat the enemies of the city of Watergate, or Waterdeep, sorry. So it's really interesting. I like that about it. And, it's just an interesting dynamic. Instead of just, okay, here's the cults, go after them and kind of, just go in guns blazing, so to speak. The chapter basically concludes, I should say, when the players have essentially defeated the element, or the surface cults, the surface outposts of the elemental cults. Now, they may also be able to circumvent attacking them, outwardly, if they, gain their trust and, are able to access the Temple of Elemental Evil underneath. But for the most part, you basically have to wipe out the surface outpost. Now, as this occurs, or as the players visit some of the different outposts, whether they're doing it is like a hostile force or not, there are some reprisals that the other cults will do. For example, if it seems like they've had friendly dealings with the Cult of Air, then the Cult of Earth, or one of the other competing ones, may send some people after them because they think that they are with the Feathergale Knights, for example. So it's an interesting chapter, and I think there's a lot of great role-playing opportunities found within it. Chapter 4 is all about the Temple of Elemental Evil. So this is when you start getting into the meat and potatoes of the campaign, so to speak. The Temple of Elemental Evil is divided into 4 sections, obviously each representing one of the elemental cults. The players can tackle the dungeons in any order. There is a recommended order in the book, but it's not set in stone. The players can go after them in whichever order they deem necessary. The chapter basically, sorry, just one moment here. So the players are going after the leaders of the elemental cults at this point. However, they only actually face one of them in the Temple of Elemental Evil. So whichever one they encounter first, be it, earth, air, fire, water, whichever one it is, they only encounter the one in the actual temple itself. The rest will all retreat to a lower section, which is the Temple of the Elemental Eye, which is the next chapter, basically. Now, as the dungeons are cleared out in Chapter 4, the remaining cults launch counterattacks, basically, again, on the surface, which are a bit more serious than they were in Chapter 3. So that's something to keep in mind, that after you clear out one, if they go back to town, for example, then something else is going to occur. So it's interesting because it means that the cult's not simply sitting idly by. They recognize the players as a threat, and they start to launch sort of counterattacks, which get more serious the more dungeons are cleared out in Chapter 4. Now, Chapter 5 is basically the climactic end of the campaign. This is where the players confront the remaining leaders of the cults, who all refer to themselves as prophets. The first prophet, which is one of the DM's choice, is encountered in the Fane of the Eye, which is the Temple of the Elemental Eye, which was created by drow worshippers thousands of years ago. So, they encounter one there. It's up to the DM which one. The other 2 remaining prophets go to the different elemental nodes, which are kind of smaller subsections of the Temple of the Elder Elemental Eye, which is where they can summon one of the princes of elemental evil. Now, the first one of the remaining 2 that the players end up confronting, they actually manage to stop the prophet before he summons his master. So they actually are able to stop the summoning procedure and take out that third prophet of the elemental cults. The last one, however, is actually successful in summoning its master as the players basically arrive into the room where the node is. So the climactic final encounter of the campaign is going to be against one of the princes of elemental evil. And which one it is really depends on which order the players decide to tackle things in. Which kind of makes for an interesting scenario where different groups can basically go through the campaign but yet have different experiences. So some groups may, be more friendly with some of the cults at the beginning, and then kind of wipe them out, tackle them in a different order, and one of the groups may face Ogrimmok at the end of the campaign, where another one may fight Imix, the elemental prince of fire. So I kind of like that. It's interesting. It's almost a bit of a shame that you don't fight all four of them and have to defeat all four of them, but that may be a bit of a challenge. You definitely wouldn't want to do them all at once, for example. But the campaign ends basically when you've defeated the 4 prophets and the 1 prince of elemental evil that they're able to summon. Now, the time that the campaign ends, the players are probably around 15th or 16th level. So if you decide to, you can continue the campaign and have the other princes somehow get summoned maybe by other prophets that were reached out to but just weren't part of this campaign. They may be different regions in Faerun, for example, where the different princes are summoned. So it's something that if you want to continue it, if the players enjoyed the fight with the 1 prince of elemental evil, you could decide to have the other ones also be summoned in different parts, and the players have to go and deal with them. So ending the campaigns at 15th level is something that I like, because it still opens the door for more things afterwards, for example. But that's the end of chapter 5. So chapter 3, 4, and 5 are the campaign itself, and they only take up about 100 pages of the book. So there's a lot of things that you're obviously going to have to fill in yourself or kind of flesh out yourself. Now, chapter 6 is basically dedicated to side quests, including a starting scenario if you want to have your players start at first level. There's a scenario that takes them from 1st, 2nd, and to 3rd level, where you can start the campaign properly. There's also a bunch of different side treks. Now, the side treks can be things that the players do sort of as a way of maybe changing things up a little bit. They're tired of delving into dungeons. They may hear some rumors and decide to investigate something, on the surface, for example. If they belong to one of the different factions, the factions have sort of an interest in some of the side treks as well. So it's kind of a way of just fleshing things out and having them do things that aren't directly connected to the overall storyline here, while still making them heroes in the regions. So, I like that aspect of it. Now, myself personally, I don't know how many of the side treks I would run for the group that I intend to run through the campaign itself, mainly because I'm running these online, and I'm kind of interested in doing what I want to start doing with my Tyranny of Dragons campaign, is to have some one-offs with different groups that take place in the same, campaign world or region, and maybe have one of these other parties kind of go through some of the different side treks. So that's what I plan on doing with them, but if you're the DM, they're kind of like a nice change of pace from all the dungeon crawling. Now, chapter 7 includes all the unique monsters or NPCs that you would fight in this campaign, as well as different magic items and the stats for the Prince of Elemental Evil. So that's all in chapter 7, which is the last true chapter of the book. Then we get into the appendices. The first appendix, Appendix A, is the Genasi race. Appendix B would be all the spells. Now, Appendix A and B, the Genasi race and the spells, are all found in the Player's Companion. But they are also reprinted in the campaign book as well. So there's nothing different in terms of what that race or the spells are from the Player's Companion to this book. It's just kind of reproducing them in this. And Appendix C has all the information about adapting this campaign to the different settings like Dark Sun, Eberron, Greyhawk, and Dragonlance. As well as, a few suggestions if you're doing like a homebrew campaign of your own design. So if you're not using one of the dedicated worlds, for example. It also includes information on, if you're using a different campaign setting, what to substitute for the different factions. So there's a lot of really nice information there. And then after that, it's just a bunch of like concept art and stuff that you can kind of use to show your players, like what the different cultists look like, for example. So that's the breakdown of the different chapters of the book. Now for my closing thoughts. I like this campaign. I think it's very well designed and well written. However, if you're a brand new DM, if you're not really familiar with running campaigns, this one may be kind of difficult for you, where it's not laid out necessarily in a linear manner. There's a lot of like role-playing elements. There's a lot of the investigation early on that's not really super fleshed out. There's just a few points on, what they can discover type of thing. So it may be a bit challenging for the newer players. Now, if you've got the starter set and ran the Lost Mines of Phandelver, you might have a slightly better idea how to run, a pre-written campaign. But that one is still pretty linear compared to this one, which tends to be a little more open-ended. So I think this is more for experienced DMs. And experienced DMs may like this a lot more than, say, the Tyranny of Dragons books, which were very point A to point B type linear campaign, whereas this one here is a lot more freeform to allow the DMs to kind of, or the players to kind of dictate, where they want to go, what they want to do, and there's just a few point forms that the DMs can kind of use. So I think experienced DMs will get a lot more out of it. That being said, the campaign is very heavily dungeon crawl oriented, especially towards the end. Like chapters 4 and 5 are essentially all dungeons with a few surface encounters. If you're running a group that don't really like large dungeon complexes, this probably won't be the best campaign for them. I know that the group I used to play with before I moved, they didn't really like the long dungeon crawls. When I ran like Shackled City and the Age Worms campaigns, for example, in 3rd edition, a lot of them relied heavily on big dungeon complexes towards the end, and it just kind of it felt like a grind for them. So if your players kind of start to shut down during like large dungeon crawls, this probably won't be the campaign for them. So kind of keep that in mind before you go out and buy it. If your group likes more of the old school dungeon crawls, then you're going to have a great time with this. But if they don't respond well, you may want to consider that before you spend the money to purchase this book. Now, another thing I actually want to throw out there at this point, between when I did my first video and this one, it was announced that you can actually buy paperback versions of the Player's Companion. You go to Drive-Thru RPG, which I'll include a link to in the description of this video. Now, there's like a premium version, which is $7 or $9.99, and I think there's just a standard version, which is $7.99. I'm assuming that's US dollars. I'm Canadian, so it'll probably end up costing a little bit more. And it's up to you if you want to spend that kind of money on it, where it's only a 25-page supplement. So is it going to be worth, $10 to have a paperback version of a 25-page booklet? I'm not really interested in getting that. I have the PDF downloaded, which you can still get for free, and I think that's as far as I really plan on going, because really all I have to do is print off the races like the Aarakocra, the Deep Gnome, and the Goliath, which weren't in this book. So that's all that I would really need. I just wanted to throw that out there in case people are interested. In the end, I think that this is a really solid campaign, and if your group are fans of, exploring dungeons, for example, then you're going to get a lot of fun out of this. I recommend it. If it's right for your group, definitely check it out. It's a little more open-ended, like I said, for experienced DMs. So it's a lot less linear than like the Tyranny of Dragons campaign was, for example. Anyway, I hope that this video helped when it comes to deciding whether you want to get it or not. I don't regret buying this. I look forward to running it. It's just a matter of getting to it after I finish up my Tyranny of Dragons campaign. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this. Again, I hope it helped. I hope you enjoyed my first impressions as well as this video, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, YouTube.